Good evening. Had to wake up Mr. Lackey there.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month.
Is your mic on?
Yes? They're saying I'm not speaking loud enough. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. Many of tonight's cases involve public hearings. For those cases, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or the representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take roll.
Mr. Beck?
Here.
Mr. Crook?
Here.
Ms. Cavazos?
Here.
Mr. Gales?
Here.
Mr. Jefferson?
Here.
Mr. Hogg?
Here.
Ms. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Lackey?
Here.
Mr. Woods?
Here.
We have 9 and a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, have all of you had ample time to review the minutes from March 16th? Any comments?
Move to approve, it's written.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chris?
Mr. Jefferson?
Aye.
Mr. Hogg?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Lackey?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Crook?
Aye.
Ms. Cavazos?
Aye.
And Mr. Gales?
Aye.
Motion passes by 9-0.
Excellent, thank you. All right, communications to the commission. Mr. Fiander?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I do not have any communications.
I like the pace we're moving here. It's too bad we don't have a ballgame to watch later. All right, yeah, there you go. The Royals are on. It's a reason to quit early, so time's exciting. Okay, with that having been said, do we have any declarations of conflict or ex parte communications that anyone wishes to declare before we get started? Okay, seeing none, why don't we proceed? We'll start with item E1. Mr. Fiander?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Tim Paris go over the staff report for the first item.
Super, thank you. Tim?
Good evening. This is case number HLD 1501, and the HLD is the Historic Landmark District. And in the history of Topeka, this is the first historic landmark district that this city has ever considered. This is being nominated by Deborah Edwards, who is here in the audience this evening. And she owns the 3 homes which are being nominated for this district. And it is a rather small district in the grand scheme of things, but it is nonetheless consistent with all of the requirements to be a local historic district. The homes within this district were built between 1882 and 1889 by John Nelson and his business partner Sven Johansson, who were both Swedish immigrants who came to Topeka in 1869. Both Mr. Nelson and Mr. Johansson were prominent developers in Topeka during the latter quarter of the 19th century, building many significant structures, including the buildings of the Sisters of Bethany Place College, several buildings on the campus of Washburn College, the Throop and Copeland Hotels, the Stormont Board of Trade, and several ornate Victorian homes throughout much of Topeka, including the Bennett Mansion, which was also the Governor's Mansion, which was located at 8th and Buchanan in Topeka. It's no longer there. And examples of the work that Mr. Nelson constructed are in the agenda packet. So you can get some visual illustrations of that work. Mr. Nelson's first residence was located at 423 Southwest Taylor. This was built in 1882. It was in the folk Victorian style of architecture, and it is brick and a two-story home. The home constructed at 419 Southwest Taylor was constructed in 1889 and is much more ornate Victorian style of architecture, Queen Anne style, in fact, and it is also constructed of full brick with very ordained oak woodwork on the interior. The home has been well maintained, and this home also is, in 2011, the owner nominated and was successful in getting this property individually listed as a local historic landmark individually rather than as a district. So 419 currently is an historic landmark. 417 Taylor was constructed in 1885, and it's a single-story folk Victorian home, also constructed of brick. All three homes are deemed to be contributors to the district. They are all visually intact and possess are consistent with the scale, materials, craftsmanship, and architecture of this particular time period, and they do meet all the criteria to be considered contributors to the district. The properties are being nominated for historic landmark designation according to the following criteria. The properties are associated with events that have made significant contribution to the broad pattern of history in the city. The properties are associated with a significant person or a group of persons in the history of the city, and the properties embody distinctive characteristics of the type, period, or method of construction, represents the work of a master builder or architect. They possess high artistic values or represents a distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. And the properties possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, and workmanship. The establishment of a historic landmark district also includes the adoption, consistent with that district, a set of design guidelines. The Historic Preservation Ordinance requires design guidelines to accompany the establishment of any historic district, and those guidelines will govern any modifications that are made to the structural integrity of those properties. The guidelines are reflective of the design, craftsmanship, materials, scale, and massing of the properties located within this nominated district, and they are consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. The guidelines have been presented to the property owner and applicant and have been returned to the planning staff with one minor alteration requested. Those alterations have been completed, and they are attached with the report as a component of the John Nelson Historic Landmark District. The ordinance will adopt the design guidelines by reference, along with the zoning overlay, which is also applied to the properties. The Topeka Landmarks Commission they considered this proposal at their regular meeting on March 12th of this year and voted to recommend approval by a vote of 7-0-0. And the planning staff also recommends approval of the John Nelson Local Historic Landmark District and the accompanying design guidelines.
Super. Any questions for Mr. Paris? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick question, and probably, I will admit, a dumb one. But as I was reading, I know I'm not the only one with dumb questions.
No, it's not dumb.
As I was reading through this, I was just trying to figure out, by any chance, would there be any unforeseen consequence, to taking this action? It looks like the owners are already, meeting standard, everything's fine. There was one property that was referenced here that was not in, not conforming with code. I think it was being used as a double apartment or something like that.
The property at 423
Yeah.
was
What
converted
happens there?
into a duplex.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily inconsistent with the design guidelines. That would be a legal
Okay.
non-conforming use with the zoning
Okay.
guidelines, but that isn't necessarily, I get the point, but it is not necessarily inconsistent with the design
Okay.
guidelines or the integrity for listing
So,
purposes
so
as a district.
no unforeseen consequences
No.
for tenants or
No.
owners? Or?
No, and in fact, I think the owner, she can answer this or verify this herself, but I think that it is her intention to return that home to single-family as it originally was.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods. Any further questions for Mr. Paris? Okay, seeing none, why don't we ask a representative of the applicant to step forward? Good evening.
Good evening.
If you would, please introduce yourself.
I'm Deborah Edwards. I own the properties that we're talking about.
And Ms. Edwards, for clarity, do you live at one of the three
I
properties?
live at 419
419.
Southwest Taylor.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Just confirming.
I hope that you will approve this. I don't know why you wouldn't. If you have questions, I'm open to questions.
Does the commission have any questions for Ms. Edwards?
She answered mine, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Lackey?
Do you, any of your neighbors have any comments about this, pro or con?
By my neighbors, you mean those directly living next door to me?
Yeah, or across the street?
Well, as you can see by the map, across the street, there's vacant lots. Actually, there's a lot of rentals on the block, so the neighbors are transient, and I see no one that got the notices came, so obviously they don't care. I wish people did care, but they don't. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I assumed from driving through the area, there was a lot of rentals there, it just appeared to be.
Yes, you know, actually what Tim didn't tell you is that 425 Taylor is also a John Nelson build, and as my finances allow, it is my hope to acquire that property also. I mean, I thought outside of the box, and the best way I know to improve my neighborhood is to buy the problem properties.
Well, we appreciate you taking
We
the bull
do.
by the horns.
You've done an excellent job so far.
Thank you. Generally, this time of year, you'll find me outside. If you drive by and would like a tour, I'd be happy to give you tours.
Excellent.
To Mr. Lackey's question, we did go through the citizen participation process, and at that time, there was there were several people, I mean, maybe a dozen people that showed up, and all of them were in support.
Were they property owners or tenants or?
They were landmark commissioners. Oh, the one neighbor that did show up lives in the sister house to my house, in the Swin Johansson house at 329 Western. And actually, as soon as I'm done with this process, I will be working with her to get her home on the local registry.
Any further questions for Ms. Edwards?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to commend the homeowner for taking this step. It's a long, involved process, and I commend you for
Thank you.
preserving these properties.
Thank you. I tell people I have a castle in the Casbah.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you, Ms. Edwards. Is there anyone else in the, actually, having heard from the applicant, I think what we'll do here is open up the floor if we need to, and we do. So with that being said, why don't we open up the meeting for a public hearing? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak for or against this project? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further observations or recommendations from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Lackey.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add my commendation to the efforts that Ms. Edwards has done. These are excuse me, these are very attractive homes that she's taking care of, and I would like to move to approve her application.
Duly noted. We have a motion.
I would
to
second.
approve, and a second. All right. With that being said, is there any further discussion regarding the application? Well, Commissioner Lackey, I too concur. I drove by and, yes, there's some other aspects of the neighborhood that need work, but my compliments to Ms. Edwards for taking the initiative to keeping her properties up and going through the exercise to give them the historical designation. So, Mr. Paris, thank you for your help on that. So,
May I add one more thing?
yes, since we're way ahead of schedule, I'll give you another minute. Please come forward.
In the process of this nomination, I was able to find Mr. Nelson's granddaughter. She is 100 years old and will be participating in the city council presentation.
That's pretty cool. Excellent. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and seeing no further discussion. Chris, why don't we go ahead and call roll?
Mr. Hall.
Yes, aye.
Mr. Jefferson.
Aye.
Mr. Gales.
Aye.
Ms. Cavazos.
Aye.
Mr. Crook.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
Mr. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Lackey.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye.
We have 9, approved by 9.
Excellent. Okay, that ends our item E category. We'll move on to item F, discussion items, starting with F1. Okay. Mr. Hall, or Mr. Fiander, yes, please.
Sure, no, you were right. I would like Mr. Hall, our current planning manager, to give you an overview of this item.
Super, thank you. Mr. Hall?
Thank you. The slides will be coming up in a minute, I believe. There we go. So before you tonight is, as a discussion item only, is a petition received on March 20th and signed by 17 homeowners for a rezone of the land and all the lots on the east and west sides of Southeast Gemstone Lane. The land that's the subject of the petition is encircled by the red rectangle. Staff has met with the owners of the lots on the west side and the east side of Gemstone Lane in 2 separate meetings. We met with them last week, and we did provide them with a copy of the packet that's in front of you tonight. Purpose of that was to inform them of the process and let them know what to expect for tonight, and provide them with as much information as they desired about that. The petition requests that the lots on Southeast Gemstone Lane be rezoned from M1 to R1. M1 is a zone that allows duplexes and single-family detached dwellings. R1 would allow single-family detached dwellings, but not duplexes. Obviously, the single-family detached dwellings are built, but this would affect what gets built on the, or it could affect what gets built on the west side, on the west side of Southeast Gemstone Lane. As those lots are vacant at this time. Rezone applications and requests are considered in one of 2 ways. The typical way those are handled is by a property owner or a developer with an interest in a property that applies to the city for a rezone application. In that case, the application has the consent of all of the owners of all the property subject to the rezone. The second category is in the event the planning commission or the city council initiates a rezone application. That is not done that frequently. It has been done in the past in the city of Topeka, but that's been done to implement a neighborhood plan and that type of thing. This is a fairly, I don't know if this is absolutely unique, but it's certainly a rare circumstance that a group of homeowners have petitioned for a rezone for land that there's not consent to rezone. The vacant lots on the west side of Gemstone Lane are owned by 4 owners. And we have talked to them, as I mentioned before. They intend to build duplexes, all except one of them, I believe. The individual that does not intend to build duplexes owns 2 of the approximately 12 lots. But all of the others, the intent is to build duplexes. What they have stated is that they intend to build high-end duplexes. And by high-end, generally speaking, they mean duplex units that are larger than average for a duplex, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, that rent for, what, in their words, $1,200 or more a month. A little bit about the history about this area. The lots along Gemstone Lane were platted in 2005. The current zoning was established immediately following that. Prior to the current zoning of M1, it was zoned RR1. Character of the neighborhood. We have taken some photos of the area, and the photos are taken from the points noted on this map. So the area is generally characterized by single-family development east of Gemstone Lane. All of the homes, or all of the housing on the east side of Gemstone Lane, it's single-family detached. And the area to the east of that area in the Stone Creek subdivision is also single-family detached homes. The area east of Gemstone Lane is zoned R1. Land on the west side of Gemstone Lane is vacant. A lot of the streets, I'll go back to the map. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. So a lot of the streets that you see on the map, those actually have not been improved. If you look to the west, that street, it's Southeast 44th Street Terrace. That stubs at where you see that red line. It does not go any further west than that, although the right-of-way has been dedicated for a street. One thing we did is look for examples of similar development, and if you go about a half mile to the west, there's a subdivision called Southborough Subdivision. And in that situation, there is a single-family residential zoning on the west side of Michigan. It's zoned R1. There are single-family detached homes being built. On the east side of Michigan, there are existing duplexes, and that is zoned M1. And there are some photos of those units. And this is all in the packet. This is information that's in the packet. The options before you tonight, this is not ready for to consider a rezone. This is only discussion of the options. There are 3 options. One of those is to not initiate a rezone application, to decide not to initiate a rezone application. Another option is to initiate a rezone application. In the event a rezone application is initiated, staff would follow the process for other rezone applications, and as required by the zoning ordinance and by statute, by Kansas statute. A neighborhood information meeting would be held, and all the notices that are required by ordinance would be issued, and there'd be a lot of ample opportunity for people to comment. A third option is to not make any decision tonight, but to defer any decision to initiate or to not initiate a rezone application to a future meeting. There are people in the audience here tonight that might want to testify or might want to speak at the podium. And with that, I will just sit for comments or questions.
Mr. Hall, I do have two, if you would. One's a question, one might be just so you could add some information for others in the room to understand. The first would be clarification, when you were referring to the lots on the west side of the street for Gemstone, you mentioned they were held by 4 different owners. I'm guessing by that you mean it's not 4 people collectively own all those lots. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 lots, and betwixt them, 4 owners may own 1, 2, or 3 or more of those lots, but there are only 4 total owners of those 12 lots.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's a
Oh,
map
there you
up
go.
on the screen
Okay.
right there that shows who owns
Okay.
all of the property. And actually, I believe that some of the property on the, well, at least 2 of the lots north of Southeast 44th Terrace are owned by Ebert Roofing. And the other owner, I think it's Mr. Roberts, is in discussions with that owner, I believe, in transferring ownership.
And my second part of that question, for clarification, so people have context, the corner lot, which is adjacent to the properties in discussion, is zone C3. For those in the room that may not be familiar with that, that's the corner that sits on California and 45th, that's adjacent to this property. It'd back up to the duplex
Right.
properties.
It's right there.
Okay, it's
zone
stipulated
C3.
C3. Could you extrapolate what someone could develop on a piece of property that's zoned C3, so they kind of understand contextually what the neighborhood consists of in addition to R1 and M1 property?
I can answer generally. I think Bill would be able to answer off the top of his head in detail, but generally a broad range of retail development.
All right, may we defer to Mr. Fiander to give some examples?
Sure, Mr. Chair. In our lexicon of commercial districts, we go from C1 to C5. C1's the lowest intensity, so as you ramp up, C2 would be our neighborhood retail. You can't, no car dealerships, that sort of thing. Large big boxes would not be allowed in C2. So when you jump into the C3, which is what this corner is, you do begin to allow some larger footprints and uses such as car dealerships, hardware stores where you can have some outside display or lawn and garden type display, automobile repair. But generally the C3 is sort of the bridge between the most intense commercial and the neighborhood retail, and that bridge is really just allows a larger footprint for, I would expect a shopping center or strip center or a grocery store or a hardware store or something like that.
Okay.
That's generally the difference in C3 and C2.
Super, thank you. Didn't mean to hold up everything here. So, thank you, Mr. Hall. Do we have any questions from the commission for
I
Mr.
have a
Hall?
question.
Yes.
Would you consider the M1 zoning as being a transitional zoning between C3 and the R1 districts?
Yeah, that's not unusual, that it's used as a transition. I would only speculate that that's why it was zoned the way it was zoned that way in the first place. So it's not unusual that be that way. Typically, the transition does not happen at the middle of the street. It does happen at the back of a lot, the way it is there.
Yes.
I have
Commissioner Jefferson?
I have a question sort of just about this process, because I don't think we've had this happen. I know we haven't had this happen since I've been on the commission. This might be a question for Mary. If we or the city council were to initiate a zone change like this, and it's ultimately approved, I'm assuming the owners here are not in favor of changing the zoning. I've just gathered that. I don't know that to be true, but could they turn around and request that it be zoned back? And if they can,
Oh,
you know, that raises all sorts of issues for me, you know, in regard to, could we deny them based on, you know, the golden factors? If we think that M1 would be appropriate. I don't know. I'm just asking.
This is a very unique situation, but I would assume if the planning commission goes forward with a rezoning application, that at some point they'll go to the governing body who will make a decision, and then there'll be some kind of litigation to challenge it, I'm sure. It'll end up in district court. But yes, I suppose that the governing body could approve the change, and then you would have the owners on the west side who are unhappy filing to have it rezoned. That would be very strange, but that possibility exists.
I guess that's the reason I ask. And again, obviously, I don't think I have no idea what the commission will decide tonight, but I worry about inviting a lawsuit.
Well, I would anticipate litigation.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson. Yes, Commissioner Lackey.
Yes, I want to make sure that I understood that this property was zoned M1 when all these houses were built.
That's the one question I didn't do a lot of research on. I know that at least a few of the houses were built after it was zoned M1.
I would be very interested in knowing how that falls out.
To extrapolate on Commissioner Lackey's question, when the lots that had the single-family homes were zoned, were the lots across the street to the west that are M1, were those also zoned simultaneously, or were they zoned at two separate times?
They were zoned all in one action,
All in one action?
all part of one application, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I may add some history, I was here. So, yeah, no, the zoning predates the houses,
okay.
yes.
Yes, Commissioner Woods.
And this may be a question maybe for later and for the owners and developers, but I'm just curious about the high-end duplexes. You know, we give a little bit of explanation about what a high-end duplex is and the difference between that, and but I'd be curious to know a little bit more at some point, and I'm also curious, you know, as to their intention. Do they intend to sell these duplexes, or are they to rent out to tenants, or?
I've spoken to at least one owner that he said that he would keep the duplexes as income property.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's the intention of all of the owners.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hall kind of gave you a couple details that we were told about what a high-end duplex would be, and I think it gave you a price point for rental or for lease, and I don't know if he gave you the expected size, or so we were under the impression these are 1,800 square foot units, which are 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I think you did say that.
Mm-hmm.
There are covenants for design as well that they'll have to adhere to, with some masonry in the front and things of that nature. So they'll have to adhere to what the private covenants are. But appliances and finishes and that sort of thing, I'd be much more comfortable if they could speak to that. But size and
yeah.
price point, it's fairly high.
So more similar to a townhouse. Not for you to answer, but
Yeah.
just curious. That'll be something that I'll be interested in knowing. As one of the architectural or engineering people.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much.
And these would have basements as well.
All right.
Just to respond to your comment about townhouses, ordinance allows someone to split a lot after a duplex has been built on it, so they can convert a duplex into a townhome, to 2 townhomes, or attached housing, if you want to call it that, attached single-family housing. There's nothing that binds them to do that, of course, and it doesn't mean that they can't not continue to be rented out, but they can be, a lot can be split. A duplex can be split down the common wall to convert it so each unit can be sold and owned separately.
Mr. Hall, Mr. Fiander, when Mr. Fiander mentioned something about covenants, were those covenants actually platted into the properties when this occurred in 2005, or is that was this part of a larger PUD? These covenants you refer to, what's the governing document as part of that?
The covenants I'm referring to had no relation to the plat
Okay.
at all that was adopted by the city.
Okay, I thought maybe you were
Yep.
extrapolating
No.
something beyond that, so, okay, thank you. Any further questions for staff?
Just for my own
Yes, Commissioner
view,
Bales.
you guys may know or you may not. Back when this was originally platted, sometimes developers will develop the homes themselves, and others, they will sell off the lots and have other builders build the houses. Do you know which direction this went? Were these all custom-built homes by multiple builders, or was it by the original owners? Like I said, you may not know. but-
We're under the, Commissioner, we were under the impression there was a single builder of the homes, but I cannot, we would have to have somebody else to confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
So fellow Commissioner, oh, yes, Commissioner Cabeos.
I just wanted to find out, they're not building on or planning soon to build on that side yet, or they are?
I believe that's how this came to the knowledge of the homeowners, is that someone was out there clearing the site, scraping and grubbing some of the lots. They've had a sign out there. So I think, depends on what soon means, but I'd say relatively soon, within the year, within the next 2 years. But I don't know the details of it. I just know that that's how this came up.
So Mr. Hall, to that point, there's no permits that have been applied for that we're aware of?
No permits have been applied for, no permits have been issued
Okay.
for the lots on the west side, on the west side. I keep getting my east and west confused, apologize.
Any further questions? So fellow commissioners, this is a petition. Technically, it's not part of the public hearings component of our meeting. However, we're basically at liberty to determine how we want to continue with this hearing of it tonight, so to speak. As the chairman, I think it would be in our best interest to take advantage of this opportunity with the audience having representative of some of the landowners present to maybe open it up for a public hearing if that's the pleasure of the commission. We can discuss it further amongst ourselves here, and then obviously Mr. Hall gave us several options as far as a direction we may take this. Basically, the petition has been bestowed upon us for our, intent to take an, action or no action here. So, thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, it seems like we all have a lot of questions, maybe a couple of comments from the audience that clear up a few of them.
Okay. Is there consensus here? I'd entertain, just to do this officially, I'd entertain a motion to open the floor up for a public hearing, if that's the pleasure of the commission.
Mr. Chair, I move that we open the floor for a public hearing.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Yes, Ms. Fanning.
Let me just make a comment. I mean, legally, a public hearing it's a term of art, and what you would be doing is simply entertaining public comment. It would not be a public hearing as required by statute.
Thank you for the clarification, so
If
that
the
there's no
second will
confusion.
accept my
Amendment?
my friendly amendment to my own motion.
Is there an acceptance of that amendment? Whoever seconded, I can't remember.
I'll second it again.
Seconded, there we go. I apologize, Commissioner Jefferson. All right, so we have a motion and second. In lieu of an official vote here, I'll just say of aye if you're in favor. Fellow commissioners, aye if you're in favor.
Aye.
And same sign if you're opposed. All right, so we'll keep it that loose. So why don't we open the floor for comments? And what I'd like to do here, in lieu of every homeowner getting up to basically concur with each other, if there is a representative that might step forward to actually speak on behalf, if you've assigned someone to represent the neighborhood, please step forward and state your name and your address, please.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Weininger. I'm actually one of the homeowners. I live at 4418 Southeast Gemstone Lane. If I can ask a quick question, I know there's kind of a 4-minute rule. I've got a fair amount of information. I'm just not sure I can cover everything in 4 minutes. And for speaking for the rest of them, if I had a little latitude there or not, I'm not sure procedurally if that's acceptable or not.
I think, yeah, since this is no longer a public hearing, I think we'll give you a little leeway.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Like I said, I live at 4418 Southeast Gemstone Lane. Sorry, maybe a little nervous. Normally I get up and talk in front of people, but I've never been in this process before. So really kind of a little bit of history, and I think we can answer a lot of the questions that you all have that Mr. Hall and Mr. Fiander weren't able to address. I've lived at my home since 2009. The zoning was put in place before any houses went up in that neighborhood, in the Stonecrest subdivision. There basically were 2 builders that built in that entire neighborhood. But they were working kind of together, 2 separate companies, but basically they owned the lots and worked on all the lots. So the restrictions were put in place and the zoning were put in place before any houses went up. The first homes went up and I think were sold in 2007. I think the last home that went up in the neighborhood was probably built maybe 3 years ago. A number of them had to be, not on our street, but on Stone Creek, which is to the east of us, had to be sold through foreclosure because unfortunately with the downturn in the economy, both of the builders that were in our neighborhood went under. At the time that every homeowner bought homes in the neighborhood, some of which were already pre-built. Ours was pre-built. We just had a few final things that we were able to add to the home. Some of them, they actually worked with the homeowners to build the homes for them in the neighborhood. So we were all promised by the homeowners. Basically what happened, with a little bit of history, is Gemstone was zoned both sides of the street as duplexes, or to be able to do either single family or duplexes. The individual, if you look at the map in the middle, just to the east of Gemstone there's basically a 7-acre lot that's owned by one individual that was there prior to the neighborhood. That individual had an issue with having duplexes butting up to the back or to the side of his property. So he worked with the builders, contractors, to be able to basically, they agreed that they would build single-family homes. We had an agreement verbally with the contractors. They said, yes, it's zoned duplex, but we will never build duplexes across from you or on Gemstone Lane. They'd be single-family homes. Everybody on our street that was the initial homeowner was given that information or told that information. So unfortunately, to get to where we're at today, with the contractors, when they went under, the lots had to be sold for in a tax auction. When that happened last year in 2014, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Ramsey Custom Homes, came up and put up signs. My understanding, he wasn't one of the owner of the lots, but he was working with one of the owners, is what we were told in the discussions with him. His intention was to build single-family homes, which we were all fine with. That's what we anticipated in the first place. And then not until kind of mid-March, a bulldozer showed up and started clearing trees. We started asking some questions, and we found out that the lots had been sold again, and the new owners were coming in to build duplexes. Obviously, we have some concerns on a number of fronts. One, first, all promised verbally that duplexes would not be built across from us. We understand that that's not very legal defense, legally defensible, if you will, right? A verbal thing that no longer exists. Learning what we've learned today, obviously all of us as homeowners would probably have done something a lot sooner than where we're at today. But we obviously have some concerns because we're concerned if duplexes go in, there's going to be a number of things that happen. Increased traffic. Most of the duplex areas that I've driven through, including the ones across the street that Mr. Hall talked about to the west side of California. There's parking in that area. There's a lot of parking out in the street. There's a lot of traffic. There are rental properties, and unfortunately, I don't think the rental properties, especially if you look in that area, as far as the neighborhood, keeping up the yards, appearances and everything else, are not near the level that you have with the single-family homes like we have in our area. So there's not been, we take a lot of pride in our neighborhood. The city's not had any complaints about mowing or anything else because the last 3 or so years, we as homeowners, 6 to 8 of us, have taken the time, we've mowed all the vacant lots across the street. We keep them, trimmed back and neat and everything else because we have a lot of pride in our neighborhood. We, obviously, we're concerned as well. I think there's only one out of the 12 homes there that is not the initial owner. So everybody's been vested, they've been there a long time. We're already seeing folks discussing potentially moving out because they don't want to have duplexes across the street from them. So we also understand and realize that this is a unique situation. I would like to find, and I think the other homeowners would like to see if there's not a win-win. I've reached out and talked to one of the builders, I think we've had 3 conversations. They've all been civil, but basically we're at an impasse. Their intent on building duplexes that are basically going to be investment property where they're renting them out. They're not going to live there, and so that concerns us. One of the other homeowners even reached out asking to buy the lot across the street from them at whatever they had invested, and the builder turned them down as well. So I'm not sure the answer. I mean, that's why we've come forward with the request for rezoning. We're concerned, obviously, for the neighborhood and the condition of the future neighborhood. If you look in the Shawnee County District, there is not a lot of newer neighborhoods like the one that we have already. I mean, there's not a lot that exists with newer homes, and the concern is that if duplexes go in there, it's going to further, bring down or deteriorate, the neighborhood as it is. So, Planning Commission doesn't plan to have generally duplexes directly across the street from single-family homes. It's an oddity that they were built this way. And like I said, if we could go back, hindsight being 2020, and what we've learned in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we would have probably been trying to do something, several years ago, and not to be where we're at today. So, what questions do you have for me?
Thank you, Mr. Wanninger. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Wanninger?
Somebody.
Yes, Commissioner Beck.
Just had one quick one. When the previous builders were going bankrupt, did you know of that occurrence before it actually was finalized, where you could have worked out some kind of a written document with them on as far as preserving? Once you go bankrupt, it kind of goes into other people's hands. But
Yeah.
I just was curious how the conversation's a little bit deeper into that.
We knew they were struggling. I don't think I heard through the grapevine that they had declared bankruptcy. We knew when they were listed that they were going up for tax auction that they were going, but we're all homeowners. We're not speculators, land speculators, contractors, realtors. Like I said, we're all kind of kicking ourselves going, hey, maybe there could have been something. Or when we were promised that, we didn't have the forethought to think, oh, geez, the market's going to go down and they're going to go under. And now this promise that was made to us about not having duplexes is, worth nothing, right? We could have had restrictions changed. We could have asked for zoning then. But unfortunately, that's stuff that we've all learned in the last 3 to 4 weeks and trying to dive into this.
I just have to, I think back to those that say, well, they promised me there'd never be a house behind me on the empty land. It'd never be developed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question. You mentioned that you had some conversations recently with the owners across the street.
With one of the builders.
Just one?
Yeah. At the time that I was talking, it wasn't until probably last Thursday, Mr. Hall came out and spoke with the numbers in the neighborhood, and he actually brought the names of the other homeowners, the other three. But because of the trees being pushed down, we were able to learn the name of the contractor that's building on those south 3 lots. And so I did talk with him in person, 3 different occasions. But, you know, like I said, he doesn't feel that they can make any money building single-family homes. I don't know that, but he's wanting to do basically investment rental duplexes and you know, put those along the street. Which what it's Mr. Bernard indicated to me that's what the other owners were planning on doing as well.
Any other questions for Mr. Weininger?
I have one. Do you happen to know whether building permits have been issued for those lots to build duplexes at this point?
No, I don't believe so, as far as what Mr. Hall has stated.
No permits have been issued or applied for.
And I don't know a win-win, like, you know what I mean? A win for us would to have single-family homes, but I'm not sure that's considered, you know, the contractors would consider that a win for them, so.
Mr. Weininger, I do have
Sure.
a question for you then. We were given a list. I'm not going to walk over there, but visually, if you can recognize that from here,
Uh-huh.
it says the list of, all right, would it be fair to say that you're here speaking on behalf of those, if you're familiar with this list?
Yes.
It says, is it fair to say that you're speaking on behalf for most of these folks, or?
Yes, I think there may be a few folks that would like to speak.
Okay.
But really, there's just a couple of us that we're going to do the main discussion for the group. We haven't had a chance to talk to 100% of the neighbors in the neighborhood.
Understood.
But nobody in the neighborhood that we've talked to, which is probably about 80% of the folks, want to see duplexes go up on the west side of Gemstone's Lane, so.
Okay, super. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yes, Commissioner Lackey.
Question for staff. By virtue of this being before the planning commission, does that have any bearing on issuing a building permit?
If we were to receive an application for a building permit, we would respond according to the zoning that's in place at the time, and we would we would approve of a building permit.
So the answer is no.
I guess the answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent question. Okay, since we're keeping this fairly open, I would ask that anyone else that comes forward, if we're going to hear a duplicate of what Mr. Weininger had said, please kind of abbreviate your comments. If you have some additional things to add, we'd love to hear them. If there's anyone else that would like to step forward and speak, please do so. Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address.
My name is Greg Smith, and our address is 4404 Southeast Gemstone. I retired 8 years ago, and 5 years ago, we were looking for a home. I was raised in Lawrence, Kansas. Don't hold that against me, please. And we wanted to move back to the area, retired from St. Louis. And we looked long and hard to try to find the right location. What's not shown on your diagram is Shawnee Lake, which is a gem for the community. And we're just 4 blocks from it. And this was just the great neighborhood for us to retire to. When we retired, we didn't look for an investment property. We looked for a retirement home. And I think to put investment properties across the street from us from our retirement home is just a mistake. We did not anticipate that, and we looked long and hard before we bought this home. So we're very pleased with the quality of the home. It is a very high-quality home, and I just do not feel on the same size lot that you can build a multi-family home of the same quality. Just won't work. That's my comment, gentlemen.
And Mr. Smith, just to be clear, 4404, is that the second house north of 45th Street, or is it the second house north of 44th Street?
It will be the second house north of 44th there.
44th, yes.
We're down toward the end. If you look to the north of us, there's pasture. Those are horse pastures out there that are maintained. Pond. What geese don't travel over to Shawnee Lake end up on that pond. And it's a dead-end street. It's a very pleasant neighborhood, gentlemen. A very pleasant neighborhood. We're very happy to be here.
Any questions from the commission for Mr. Smith? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to step forward? For or against? Please come forward. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Mike Hapdig. I'm an attorney here in town with the Sloan Law Firm. I'm here on behalf of one of the builders, MTK Properties. He's been referenced before. The owner of MTK is Mitch Bernard. Mr. Bernard has sort of a loose partnership with one of the other developers that owns some of these lots. And I've been asked to speak somewhat on his behalf as well. I don't represent him, but at this point their interests are aligned. If you go back to the property ownership map, MTK Properties, or Mitch Bernard, owns the south 3 lots.
Okay.
And, excuse me, the north 2 lots that are indicated, lots 21 and 22 with Everett Roofing, those are also now acquired by MTK Properties, Mitch Bernard as well. So there's three owners at this time, and that's a relatively new occurrence, probably before this exhibit was created. As the commission has obviously figured out, the owners on the west side of Gemstone are certainly not in favor of this zoning change. These properties were bought with the intention of putting these duplexes, these duplex units on the lots. As has been discussed, in 2006 it was zoned M1, and not only was it zoned M1, but you've heard discussion about these existing covenants, and those covenants, they allow duplexes. The duplexes that are being considered are going to be bi-level duplexes. They're going to be between 18 and 2,000 square feet per unit, per side. We're not talking a grand total of 2,000 square feet that are split. Each side will have that square footage. As was mentioned, the covenants also required a certain facade, so it matches with the remainder of the community, and as well as a 2-car garage. Each unit will have a 2-car garage as well. So the intent of the builders is to create duplexes or create housing that is consistent with the nature of the community, as is allowed by not only the zoning, but also the existing covenants that were in place when all these homes were built. One of the key issues I think that needs to be looked at, and I believe this was discussed by one of the commission members earlier, the corner of 45th and California is the C3 commercial zoning. That's more intensive use, obviously, than the residential that is being sought. And the question was, is this M1 zoning sort of a buffer or a transition zone between those more intensive use C1 properties and the less intensive residential properties? And it absolutely is. And reading straight from the city code, section 18.90.010, I'm going to pull an excerpt out of there. It talks about the location of this district is intended to provide a transitional use between the single-family detached dwelling districts and other districts which are more intensive. That is exactly the purpose of this type of zoning. That's why it was put in the first place, and it would be the builders and my suggestion that it remain in that same fashion. I think one of the main recurring themes that we're having here is the concern about the property values. And again, I'd like to reiterate the intent of these builders is to come up with a floor plan, a property that is consistent with that area. The intent is not to create low-income housing in this area. The intent is to come in there, has been discussed before, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 18 to 2,000 square feet, and they want to do high-end finishes in these homes. One of the conversations I had with Mitch Bernard today, they were discussing, what is more beneficial? Do I look at increasing the square footage and tend towards 2,000 square feet, or do I tend towards 1,800 square feet and go with the onyx and the granite and the slate tile? I mean, these are the kinds of finishes that are being discussed in these homes. We're not talking about something they're just trying to throw up and get someone in there. And again, I think this was discussed earlier, the monthly rent that they're looking at from these units is $1,200 to $1,350 per month. That's the target range that we're looking at here. And so in terms of the degradation of the community, I think, while I certainly understand the concern, I think the intent of these builders is to avoid that. One of the other issues that has been discussed is sort of the timing of this. At this point, there are no permits issued, but it has been discussed with the city staff whether the builders could get a permit at this time. And the answer is essentially yes. The plans that are being developed and are expected to be completed this week, as I understand, in terms of the types of homes that would be constructed on these lots, once those plans are finalized, the permitting process can go forward, and that is anticipated to happen quite quickly. And in essence, from a practical standpoint, the city doesn't really have the discretion to deny those permits when it's consistent with the zoning and frankly, as well as the covenants. And so if it were decided by this body to proceed with a recommendation to investigate or initiate a zoning change, at the end of the day, it's likely that the builders are still going to go ahead and seek those permits and would complete the construction. Then what we'd be looking at is a legal non-conforming use, and we'd still have duplexes on that street anyways. So in terms of an allocation of resources, I don't believe it's advisable from that standpoint as well in terms of really having the desired effect that's being sought here. And with that, the only other issue, and I'm not trying to pile on here, but one of the discussions that has been brought to my attention before, and I heard it expressed here again this evening, is that these homeowners were promised that there would not be duplexes in this area, and I can commiserate with that. That would certainly be unfortunate, but at that time, a review of the covenants that were in place would have indicated that the duplex units were certainly allowed within that subdivision, and had those covenants been amended or modified at that time, you certainly could have prohibited duplexes in that area, but that wasn't ever done, and certainly not, it's not fair to ask a subsequent investor to live up to a statement made by someone when he didn't even know it was made. Simply, that's not fair to the subsequent purchasers. So that's really all I have. If there are any other questions that I could try and answer on behalf of the builders, I certainly will.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions for this gentleman from the commission? Commissioner
Do you know, does your client own any other property in the area? other than the lots which you have mentioned?
I know he owns several lots around town, and generally speaking, in the area, I believe he has units in the general area. How geographically close,
Oh, okay.
I honestly can't say.
I guess the reason I was asking is I was more curious who might own the properties there to the rest of the M1 properties to the west. I didn't know if he.
I'm not sure. I know he has other properties in the Shawnee Heights district generally, but I'm not sure how close related to these properties.
Commissioner Lackey?
Yes, you mentioned you were basically speaking for the two of the owners. Who's the other one?
It is Jeff Hornbeck. He would be the gentleman that owns, like I said, Mitch owns the south 3 lots, and then the next 5 to the north.
Okay.
So essentially all the lots south of 44th, and then the very 2 north lots are owned by
Okay.
the gentleman I'm speaking on behalf of.
Any other questions for the gentleman?
And one more.
Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
You pretty much answered this, but I just wanted to touch on it. And obviously respecting any privilege you have, has your client discussed what reaction he may have if, let's say, this commission or the governing body initiated a zoning change? I know you talked about any permits you could go ahead and get and start building, you would do that. But let's say there were a few open lots left and you couldn't at that point.
Well, the general discussions that I've had is he thinks he can get that done within the requisite build period on whatever permits that he did go ahead and pull.
Commissioner Lackey?
My question probably could be addressed to both of you, and if you'd both like to answer, Mary. Would your owners view a zoning change as taking away a property right?
I will say that, Mary, I need to be careful here, don't I?
Yeah. Both of you, but I want to hear what you think.
Just regular legal opinion.
Yeah, just my legal opinion. I have certainly discussed with my client what alternative avenues there might be in the event this goes through.
Yeah, that answers my question. Mary, what do you think?
Oh, I think he could make some pretty decent arguments to attack whatever, if the commission should choose to pursue this. I do have a question. When you talk about the covenants, what body or what document embodies these covenants?
There was, and I apologize, I didn't bring a copy of the covenants with me this evening. I regret that once I heard the earlier discussions. There was a declaration of covenants and restrictions for the Stone Crest subdivision. And essentially what that requires, it has certain square footage requirements, basement requirement, et cetera, and also discusses the facade that would be required on these units
So
as well.
it's filed of record then?
It is,
Oh,
it
okay.
is.
Thank you.
So that's a platted, Mary, that's a platted then.
It's not in the plat. It's a separate document called Declaration of Covenants and
Is
Restrictions.
my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I don't believe it was, from the looks of it, it was in no way involved in the platting process.
Okay.
There's not an HOA in place, is there?
Not to my knowledge. And the covenants and restrictions don't reference an HOA. There's no governing body for an HOA created. It's about I don't want to misspeak, but it's probably a 3-page document in total.